Everybody's Tim Hinton, the Beast of the Marching Arts. Thanks for watching this conversation brought to you by Marching Arts Education. Tonight today actually, it's the middle of the day. We don't usually do these during the day, but here we are. So today we are talking about choosing festival repertoire. I think it's a really helpful, very smart topic. And with us today, we have Dr. John Sweet from Washington State University. John, how are you?
I'm doing great. Glad to be here, y'all.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. And also with us, Dr. Tremon Kizer from the University of Central Florida. Tremon, how are you?
Doing well. Thank you very much. It's great to see everybody.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here. And thank you, of course, to LCL Mentors, who is the sponsor of this live conversation. So thank you. Everybody can find Leaders Creating Leaders at leaderscreating.com. Leaders Creating Leaders is doing a lot of great job mentoring and out there educating student leaders and band directors and everybody in the world of music and marching. So thank you to them for that sponsorship. So we're talking about choosing festival repertoire. I have to tell you, I feel like this makes or breaks a lot of program. Like I feel like it's critically important to setting your kids up for success. And unfortunately, we've all seen those performances where it didn't seem like the director took the right things into account or possibly missed something along the way. So I think this is going to be a really interesting conversation. John, I'll just randomly start with you. Where would you start the conversation about choosing this repertoire?
Well, for me, if I'm not starting with something that I like to listen to, it's not going to go great. So I like to start with a pile of music that I would want to teach. Because if I don't feel an artistic connection, an educational connection, a musical connection, a feeling, any of those kind of things, then I think it's going to be rough sledding for the whole semester. So I like to start my pile like that. I guess to start, you've just got to have a pile. I think, starting with something, hey, I love this. I want to hear this. I could deal with this for 6, 8, 12 weeks is a good place to start.
Yeah, no, I think, John, I think you've hit it right on the head, because there's so many times when we will go and listen to or take the advice of what people have, which is great. But sometimes some of those pieces that we might be had advice about might not be something that we resonate with. But sometimes, especially beginning teachers, they just go with it because that's what the seasoned teachers have said to do. So I think it really is important to find music that resonates with you as an educator, but then also that resonates with the students. So I think it's great that if you're able to take that pile, or take those pieces and just allow students just to play those pieces, to see what they might think about those pieces, especially just on the first read, just getting some student buy-in. If there's student buy-in with some of those pieces, great. If there isn't student buy-in, then maybe that's a piece to save for another time, for another occasion, or for a future MPA. So finding pieces that resonate with the teacher and also with the students, I think is going to help overall.
Yeah, Tremon, I really like that a lot. But don't solely base your selection on whether or not the students like it, because you are the expert in the room. And I can tell you on multiple occasions, pieces that I've picked that didn't resonate on the first read. They're like, ugh, I hate this piece. And by the end, it was their favorite piece that they played all year. So, but having a really good knowledge of what your students' buy-in could be, or what you think they could, what your experience with them in the past has been, that helps with that selection. I agree 100%.
Oh, yes. And I think one of the things we used to do in the past that helped, not every single year, but it helped enough was whatever that pile was that we brought in. Those are pieces that we knew had substance, that it was going to challenge the students in various ways. And to me, it's kind of like if you put certain pieces in front of students, it's pieces that you already believe in, it's pieces that you already know. So if students get a chance to, let's say, have a half percent of the vote, and the director has the other 60%, at least you know what you're giving them is going to be something that you're going to be happy with, and something that you think is going to be not only educational, but also an enjoyable process. Because I do think that when teachers start to go into this music performance assessment mode, there's this level of anxiety that seems like it comes in, but really at the end of the day, it's a celebration of learning. It's a celebration of the journey that students have gone on, and going on stage and doing the actual assessment piece is the celebration part. And I think as long as teachers are able to take those pieces that they believe in, that they give the students, and then help the students on that journey, the day of is it really is just a wonderful moment. And adjudicators just more affirm things that the teachers have been talking about over the course of the year.
Yeah, 100%. And, to me, the thing I take from that is that whole anxiety piece about going to assessment. When I taught in Texas, the dreaded, UIL concert and sight reading thing, all of that. And, I think that goes to what you select as well, that can help you with the anxiety part of things. Are you choosing music that's going to, stretch your kids so much that you're afraid it's not going to be perfect by the time assessment rolls around? Or are you selecting something so easy that, it's completely ready to go 6 weeks out, and so finding that time thing, I think, is probably one of the biggest struggles that educators have when selecting that music, and for the longest time I overprogrammed. Well, let me rephrase that. I still overprogram. I think that's in all of us, right? Because we see these bold things. We want our students to be able to experience this great music. But to me, and choosing music for performance evaluation specifically, I want to pick something that I know the students can play perfectly, so that we can have that bar for the rest of the year with more difficult things. So maybe on the spring concert, we put our most difficult music and we say the bar from our performance where we went to assessment, we played this absolutely perfectly. Now that's the bar for this harder music and a little less pressure situation.
Oh yeah, no, I think that is extremely important for adjudicators to hear the strengths or so, like where that bar is, and then at the end of the year be able to push that envelope a little bit. I think it's also important that adjudicators get a chance to, let's say, they would say in the BOA world or DCI world, sample the ensemble. So tuba players being able to have something that they can sink their teeth into a bit, but also that's attainable. Sometimes when we choose pieces, we choose pieces that might be, let's say, a grade 3 piece, but it might not be a grade 3 piece amongst all of the instruments. It might be a grade 3 in the melody, but it might be a grade 1 in different areas. So part of that, I think part of that bar is the panel being able to hear how well tubas play, how well bass clarinets play, how well your bari saxes play, or even your tenor saxes and euphoniums. So finding those pieces that would allow those instruments to have just as much of an opportunity to play music as flutes, clarinets, trumpets, your instruments that might play the melody the majority of the time, especially with some of the easier works.
One of the things I do a lot is when I'm hearing new pieces, I'm kind of doing an inventory of what's in them. Does the tuba have the melody here? How high do the trumpet parts go? Because how many times have we seen a piece and we're like, oh, this looks like a grade 3, but it lands just like D to G the entire time for the first trumpets, and they're just spent the rest of the concert for it. So, having like an inventory of the pieces that you look at, like you just flipping through a piece, or you listen to a piece on Spotify on your, concert band playlist kind of thing. Are you doing an inventory of what is difficult, what is easy, who has the melody, what are the ranges, and those kind of things? Because I think sometimes we just peruse through a piece and we go, oh, yeah, my band can do that. Or, oh, I've got 8 percussionists and this has 8 percussion parts. It's going to be really great. But we miss that there's a vibraphone ostinato going through it, and we don't have anybody that can keep really solid time through that. And then it drives us nuts. So being able to have that detailed analysis of your score, from a 100-foot view. And that's kind of weird, like a detailed view from 100 feet out. But being able to look through the score and go, okay, I'm going to do an assessment of percussion. Oh, I have this. Oh, I don't have this kind of thing, can help in that choosing music that gets everybody. The other thing is, if you choose a piece of music that features tuba, low brass like crazy for one song, think about the demand that you're putting on them for one. If it's maybe that's a +1 in demand, well, maybe you need to be -1 in another song in their demand so that they can reach that piece.
Mm-hmm. Oh no, I think that's extremely important, because when you are going PA or going through any type of assessment, it's not just one piece, but it's a concert in itself, and so the more you're able to help students from a mental standpoint, from a physical standpoint, meet all of the demands, I think it's going to be beneficial for them. I think another thing that's going to help too is actually finding for any director, finding pieces that that you'll be able to teach well. Sometimes, and I have fallen victim to this. I remember my first year going to performance assessment, and I picked a piece that we did when I was back in college, and it was because it was a piece I believed in, and as a piece I thought that I knew very well because I knew that trombone part very well. So I was like, okay, I'll be able to teach that, but not realizing how much detail that really goes into making the piece actually work. And I got myself in so much trouble, but also a blessing at the same time, because at that first MPA, the panel actually stopped the performance assessment after we finished and had me go over to them and start helping me mark the score, start telling me the things I should have listened to. I did not listen to this. And it just made me think, wow, okay, I have a lot of work to do. So I think find pieces that that you will be able to teach at a very high level, each part equally well, and be able to synthesize it, I think is going to help quite a bit.
Yeah. And we're trading first year stories. My first contest that I went to for concert band, one of the judges wrote, "You need to spend less time conducting and more time teaching." And I was like, oh, it just hit me to the core, because I thought my innate personality or my innate musicality would automatically translate to students. And it doesn't work that way. You've got to have a plan. And, going and looking at your contest, I like to do reverse calendar pacing and going, okay, if I need to have it by this, then 2 weeks before this, I need to make sure that this goal is met and things like that, so that we have checkpoints as it goes on. And a lot of that also goes to, just because you experience the piece a certain way doesn't mean that your current ensemble is going to experience it that same way. And getting feedback from mentors, if you've taught 1 to 5 years, you need to have mentors in your room all the time. If you've taught 10 to 15 years, you need to have mentors in your room all the time. If you've taught over 20 years, you need to have mentors in your room all the time. I have mentors that I talk to constantly, and getting their feedback on what they've heard or what they've heard this band do in the past and things like that can give you some information when you choose something. If it's your first year at a school, you have less knowledge than when you've been there for a little bit of time.
Oh yes. Oh yeah. And for those who are in their first school, some of the things you can do to help yourself find pieces is, one, listen to the previous MPA or performance assessment evaluations, whether it's looking at the scores, or whether it is listening to the feedback. Look back and see what has happened the past 5 years, and see where the high points were, the strengths of those ensembles during that time. But then also, what is something that the adjudicators consistently talked about each year? And whatever those things are, maybe that starts to become an area of focus for that next year. And after you did your own assessment of the ensemble. I think another thing that you can do if you're in your first year at a school is also get idea from other educators that might be in the city, if there's other educators in that city, of where that ensemble has been and what that ensemble is currently doing. And also talk to other people that might have been in the classroom of that particular school, to be able to just chat with them about what the strengths were whenever they went and did clinics, or where the setbacks might have been when it came to either choosing music or from the preparation standpoint. So I think there's various things you can do in your first year position to help put yourself in position. I think one other thing that you can do too is, and I'm a firm believer that while students are not going to drive the curriculum, students will let you know how process worked, and if they thought they were put in a position to be successful, or if they felt like that there were some drawbacks. I think talking to just a few selected students that might have been student leaders that previous year or two, finding out what they thought about the whole entire process. So I think the more people you bring to the table to help inform you of the direction that you need to go, I think that's going to be highly beneficial for you if you're in your first year. Sometimes you're going to be in your first year to school. It might not be your first year teaching. However, it's so great to collect enough inventory to get that pile, as John has talked about previously, to help inform you on how to move forward.
Yeah. And gosh, sometimes you have a process that you believe in and it doesn't work. I say all the time, I don't lose. And sometimes that's kind of cocky. But I either win or I grow, kind of thing. So you find a way, like, man, this process did not work this year. How can we improve it for next year? And being open with your students about that. Your students will trust when you're being open and honest and vulnerable with them for, things that go before. Like, if you did a process for your holiday concert, your winter concert, your fall concert, and it worked really well, you could say, we're going to use this same process again for this next cycle, and making sure that the process is right. But if something didn't work, you work with your stakeholders, your students, your co-teachers, anybody else that might be around to make the process the best, so the students can learn in a positive and cooperative environment. Yeah.
Oh, yes. It's interesting that you talk about your co-teachers and stakeholders, and I know that there's going to be some people listening to this that might not have a co-teacher, or you might be the only one. You might be in a very remote area, and I completely understand, because for my first teaching position, the closest university was 140 miles away, and the closest airport was 250 miles away. And so one of the things we had to do was we just had to make recordings, and we would have to send recordings out to get feedback. It was cassette tape, at the time. So we had to put those puppies in the mail and get the feedback however we could, whether it's through email or something along those lines. But with today's technology, it's easy to just record, whether it's on your phone, even if it's not the best quality recording, but just some type of recording to send out to whether it's your mentors or even if it's peers that you might have went to college with, just to have somebody else wrap their ears around what you're listening to. And then I think it's important that even if you might not have the most resources with having people listen to your ensemble, at least finding that one person that you might be able to give a few $100s to come out if you're in a remote area and you take care of their gas or take care of their hotel, to come and work with each of your groups. And if you have one group, hopefully it'd be easy for you to talk your principal into having a day clinic or a half day clinic where the students are out of school for that half a day and you're working with the guest conductor. You're pull out sectionals during that time. You're really making you're doing a whole conservatory environment for a half a day. So students are starting to understand how to really prepare and how to really get themselves set up to have a great MPA experience. I know that there are some people that do an entire weekend of that. They treat it as if it was a marching band camp. Now, with marching band camps, you probably do a week or two, but with a concert camp, if you do an entire week and bring in people to do sectionals, bring in people to work with each of your ensembles and have a potential culmination concert there at the end of the weekend where your parents are able to come in and able to see and hear the progress that has been made. That's also that you could potentially do. With some of those too, you can have some of those clinicians that you have come in do leadership workshops as well. So it's just a wide variety of things. And those who are in the concert program will start to also feel that that program is treated just as equal or even more than the marching band world.
Yeah, when I taught small school in Texas, we had a Monday night or a Tuesday night rehearsal every week for concert season. And we would bring in area teachers, students from the community college, the junior college that was, 45 minutes down the road, all sorts of things so all the students would get focused sectionals on their instrument on how to play the piece. And then we'd come together and work with a clinician. But, one of the biggest things I learned from that was the time that those students spent on fundamental skills to prepare themselves for the concert music. And, sometimes we choose music, we're so excited about it that all we want to do is play the literature and we forget about that training and developing those skills. Two of my biggest mentors preached to me fundamental skills all the time kind of thing. They'd come in and watch my band and give me 3 pages of notes, and it would all be about fundamental skills. So making sure that you take that time with knowledge of what you've chosen. So if you've chosen a specific piece of music, then you could look at the technique demands, the scalar demands, all of those, the balance, dynamic demands. If there's a lot of piano, are you also doing your warm-ups at that dynamic level to help them out kind of thing? So being able to structure your curriculum based upon what you've chosen can enhance what you've chosen. So, when I'm choosing music, I'm thinking that in the back of my mind, okay, if I have to teach octatonic scales, can my kids master all the major scales? What am I throwing at them that they don't have the prerequisite skills already? And what do I have to teach them to get them there?
Oh yeah, no, it's interesting you say that because what it reminded me of is something that we talk to our music education majors about when they're taking that How to Be a Band Director course for classes. And unfortunately, we say course now because a lot of colleges, universities are trying to truncate music ed programs to 120 credit hours, which is which is like putting a marching band in a tuna can. But one of the assignments we have for them is we have them do learning packets. So we have them find a piece that they might do for a MPA or for some type of assessment. And we make sure it's a grade 1 through 3 piece because once you get to grades 4 through 6, it becomes a little dense for the college students when they're having to do score study. But they have the learning packet for that. And within that learning packet, they have to talk about the history of the piece, who the composer is. But then they have to dig deeper and identify where all the melodies are within the piece, where all the counter melodies are within the piece. And they have to put it in music notation software, but then also transcribe it for every instrument. So then when they give it to their middle school group or intermediate high school group, those students are learning everything. They're not just learning their part, but they're learning to identify where the melody is, where the counter melody is, and also having to play that on their instrument. We have the students take it even further, and those students also have to figure out the stylistic considerations for the piece, and also find exercises that might help with that stylistic considerations. Also, they have to identify different types of warm-ups that they need to do to help the ensemble be able to play in a certain way. So when they transfer that knowledge from the warm-up to the piece, is even more of a smoother transfer. But then we also talk about the BLTs of warming up and how each of those are going to translate to putting the piece together, which goes all the way back to what John has talked about with fundamentals. I think the more you can do fundamentals, but showing students that it might feel like it's a fundamental, but in essence, you really are teaching the piece as well. It all blends in perfectly. So by the time the student has to practice on their own, because you hope they're able to practice, one, they have a learning packet to look at to help them practice. Two, they're able to, they have the warm-ups that they need in order to practice that piece well. But then three, the parents are able to help because the parents have a packet that they're able to look off of with recordings that you might have on that learning packet.
Do you remember those old best in class pieces? A lot of them would come with that information. And now, I think in the realm of educational music, there's so much more quality music now, but you don't get those packets. So you have to be able to create them yourself so that students can, find mastery. And the other thing with that is how much time do you have in rehearsal to master? So like if you have all these fundamentals you have to teach, but you only meet with your band, you're on block scheduling and you only get an hour Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you're probably not going to play music for Prague with them because you're not going to have the time to get all of that done. So, seeing your resources, and your resources are your students, your resources are your facility. Your resources are how much time you have. It's not just how much money you have to spend on a piece of music. It's, managing all of those things together when you're selecting it.
Oh yeah. John, I'm going to laugh because you said you're going to do music for Prague, if you're on a block schedule meeting, for 1 hour, 3 times a week. And our ensemble that I conduct, we did music for Prague with an hour and a half twice a week. That would explain a lot about the intonation. Thanks, John. I appreciate that. I need to hear that.
Because I've been enjoying listening to this conversation. I think you're making so many great points. I have to tell you that it's been a while since I was in the classroom because I've been self-employed writing music and stuff this whole time. But I do remember very clearly that some years I just thought I had like to really look for a piece that worked for my weird little group. Like every year it's like for some reason this year the clarinets can hardly play their way out of a paper bag. What am I going to do? And then I had to really search to find that piece that would be successful or feature certain things. But mostly it was about hiding certain deficiencies. So I feel like that's part of it. And you guys have kind of mentioned that, but I feel like it's like figuring out, like you said, who do I really have? I do have a question for you guys. And that is that I feel like there are certain things in this arena of choosing your festival repertoires, what we're talking about. There's certain tropes that band directors have bought into. For example, there are certain things that you just don't play. Like, don't choose, for example, no one would ever play one of the whole suites on an evaluation because supposedly every judge has this very specific way they think it has to go, and that you can't possibly satisfy that. So is that true that there are certain things that should or pieces that are played too much? Do you want to weigh in on that at all?
Well, okay, I have said those things before. I'm going to come right out there and say I've said those things, but I'm going to put a caveat on that. If you can play something really well, how you interpret it, as long as it is interpreted with research and knowledge behind it, not like, okay, I'm going to take the march from, the Holst First Suite at 144 because it's a British march. You're not going to do that. Like, as long as you're making one of those choices, if you're hiring adjudicators who are doing the right things, if you do everything technically proficient, that should not count against your students. Now, to me personally, I would put a Holst on a spring concert over I would do, for an adjudication. But every director has to choose something that resonates with their students and them and their community. And if the Holst First Suite does that, or if you've got some kids that, they're dying to play the second suite because you've got a euphonium soloist who can carry the whole thing, then play it. But having the thing is you're not going to get credit for playing at something because you are playing something. So if you are playing, let's just go back to Holst First Suite, and you're not playing it with technical proficiency and great tone and great balance, don't expect the judges to give you a pass because, it's a really difficult piece of music. Okay. The judges are there to evaluate what you are doing within the rubric of what's going on. So don't try to choose something a little bit harder just so you can get some extra credit.
Yeah, it's the what and the how, right? Go ahead, Tremon.
Yeah, I was going to say, the adjudicators there are there to really support what you're doing. So if you decide to do a Holst First Suite, they really want just to hear everything be carried according to the way that what the composer has put on the page. We have to remember too that the adjudicators really do not. I don't think adjudicators care what somebody plays as long as it's played well at the end of the day. So you can play First Suite or you can play a childhood hymn, as long as they are played well according to what the music states. Then that's great. I also know that there's some certain states that you do have a required music list, and so it's just going to be natural for some pieces just to continue to be played or reoccur. And I think adjudicators understand that if there is a required music list, especially for certain states that might not have a significant amount of pieces for certain grade levels. For instance, there's some states where grades 1 and grade 2, it is very, very small. So those adjudicators are going to be used to hearing some of the same things. But I think what the adjudicators are looking for is just from the ensemble is playing with good balance, playing with good intonation, playing with good blend, good balance, making sure that every sonority is present, and making sure also according to the group, each age, that timbres are matched consistently, or at least as consistently as it can. So I think the only time adjudicators might, and this is just, I say might because I have fallen into that, is if you're if you're adjudicating somewhere and you have 7 groups do the exact same piece. But that's just because of human nature. And that takes me back to a marching band festival I had to adjudicate one time, and it happened to be Halloween. And I think I saw the Thriller dance 12 times out of the 20 bands because they all thought it was going to be original. But outside of that, I think from an education standpoint, the directors will be okay.
Okay, so let me ask a follow-up then. I loved to play transcriptions with my band, right? And that was something that a lot of my colleagues just absolutely would not do, right? So do you guys feel like there's any rules about that, unwritten rules about playing a transcription versus playing a piece written for concert band? It's because I had some great success playing, Jupiter from the Planets and Overture to Candide, etc. So you guys want to weigh in on that at all?
Yeah, I think that's interesting you say that, because while we hope that there would be an orchestra program in every single school across the country, there isn't. And so with that, there's a lot of schools where the opportunity to hear good orchestral repertoire is going to be through transcriptions. I think transcriptions are very important in our medium, and I think that also if they're on required music lists, they're on required music lists for a reason. And I think that we also, as the band world, some of the compositional techniques and devices came from the way orchestra scores were written, orchestra composers wrote for orchestra. I think that there is a time and place. I know that we do a transcription each year, maybe 2. I think the last few years, I think it's been 1 per year. But we do that for not only the educational value, but we're also trying to introduce our students to that orchestral world. So when they go to an orchestra concert, or if they're inspired to go to an orchestra concert, they have a base as well. And also, some of the demands of the woodwind parts can be at times just a little bit more, and also for brass a little bit more demanding in certain areas. And I think our students need that.
I'm so glad you said that. Some of the pieces that I fell in love with orchestrally, I fell in love because I played a transcription of them. Those war horses and things like that. And in Texas, everybody played a Merlin Patterson transcription, it seemed like. I loved them. But I think the most important thing that you said is it comes down to balance in what you're choosing throughout a student's career for repertoire. I mean, if you're doing only transcriptions, I think that you're serving your students poorly for a lot of original band music that's out there. The same thing, if you're only doing original band music, then you're doing a disservice for them to have opportunity to play some of the orchestral transcriptions, to develop some of those techniques. So, are you considering what you are choosing repertoire-wise throughout your whole year? Or are you just kind of doing whatever feels good at the moment, and then you find that you kind of gravitate as an educator to the same kind of pieces all the time?
Yeah, so let me ask a follow-up then, based on what you guys just said. This is very interesting. I appreciate you guys answering my question around this. I had many conversations like this with educators who are always encouraging band directors not to necessarily assume that all of the articulations and everything on the score are holy writ, right? But it's like make it sound good. So if it's a big slurred thing and you want to do tongue 2, slur 2, or if it's all tongued, which is the more egregious one, right? If the woodwinds have this long all tongued and you can change that a little bit. The idea is if it sounds great and they're making great sounds, that nobody's going to, oh, well, they can't get a top assessment score because they changed much. So do you guys want to weigh in on that at all? Because I feel like there are things out there that people step away from. And if they think about it this way, perhaps they would give it a try. John, you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, I think it depends on what you're playing, because certain types of literature give you different freedoms. Like if you're doing a Sousa march, you can do some changing of percussion instruments, like, moving to like a wood block or something, instead of the snare, or on the rim and the trio kind of thing to help the balance and things. But, if I'm hearing Festive Overture, and somebody makes it slur to, tongue to the whole time, it doesn't become the composer's work anymore. So I think whatever we choose to make sound good still makes it sound like the composer had intended.
Yes. And I think at the end of the day, it comes down to composer intent. And if the composer is a living composer, you have the option of also asking the composer, which is great. And composers, a lot of composers out there are nice to be able to email back or respond back in some way and answer those questions. I think there's also one of the things also considered too is where your venue is, because if you're performing, let's say in a gym, you might have to have a little firmer articulation at time, or maybe even just or maybe not as firm articulations from time to time, depending upon how that's going to come back, how that sound is going to come back to the adjudicators. So I think there's various things that you have to take in consideration when you're changing articulations, changing dynamics, changing style overall. But at the end of the day, it does come to composer's intent. And also, I think the venue that you're performing in, because the venue will speak to you sometimes more than anything else. I can't tell you how many times that after that first piece at a MPA, when we, as the adjudicators are still making their comments before we start the next piece, how I had to make some adjustments right on the fly. Bones, this place is really hot, so you can just back off just a little bit. Clarinet, you don't have to articulate nearly as much as we might have thought. So just each of your stress accents, now turn them into a tenuto or percussion. Wow. Really come out just a little bit more, because it's not bouncing off the wall as much as we thought. Those types of things. So we also have to keep that in mind, that just because a music says to play piano or play forte or to use this certain type of articulation, that's the framework, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's always going to be true.
And that goes back to, are we teaching pieces or are we teaching fundamental skills? So if you're just teaching the piece, it goes like this. Okay, you need to articulate like this. Then you can't adjust on the fly and say, students, I need you to change this articulation, because they don't have the real world skills to apply into that situation. So, going into it, knowing, hey, we don't know what this is going to be like, can, help you develop the skills of your students.
Yeah, absolutely. Great point. So I've sort of alluded to this a couple of times, and I've heard you guys say it in passing, but I do have a personal belief that the thing that matters the most is, does the band sound good? Right. Like, is it in tune? Is it well balanced? Are we playing with good tone quality? And I like to tell, band directors, sometimes they can just relax, in my opinion, and you guys might not agree with this, they can relax a little bit about being so manic about every detail. If the band's going to sound good, you're going to be okay. You're going to get that score that you want, that assessment rating that you want, if the band sounds good. I'm not saying not to do all the stuff, right? But ultimately, are we playing in tune? Are we playing with good sounds? Is there balance? I feel like that's where you get your superior rating. Do you guys agree with that thought?
To a degree, I do. I also believe that the process takes care of a lot of those things. So if you're doing it the right way, the process is going to yield the results. I'll give a story. And this is a marching band story, but I think it really applies. I had this one student, I'm not going to say their name because I don't want them to be embarrassed, that could not march in step to save their life. And I focused in on that one student for weeks and weeks and weeks. And I determined the growth and the strength of the ensemble on that one person. And I brought in one of my colleagues, one of my mentors, and clinic the band. And he said, John, why are you spending all your time looking at that one student when all these other students need this, 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 and this? So I think sometimes we get deer in headlights. We're like, oh, I just have to get this one thing right when everything else around might be on fire too. So having a holistic approach to what's going on. The other thing is, sometimes we stand in front of a band and we're like, I don't know how many times you guys have heard this, but you walk into a clinic and they go, if you had just seen where we started, and they're so proud of their growth. But I'm like, yeah, celebrate that, but measure by a standard. And I think sometimes we miss that part of the sounding good, the having the good ensemble techniques. My high school band director, Bill Watson, said to me several times, hey, John, what are the third trumpets doing? And I'm like, because I'm so focused on this one thing that's driving me crazy.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that we do get it's tunnel vision as teachers, but one of the things that we remember is that most of the adjudication sheets will have a rubric on the back, and it will spell out what does a superior look like, what does an excellent look like, what does a good look like, what does a fair look like. So one of the things I encourage everybody to do is to give the rubric to all the students, so the students have an idea of what adjudicators are going to be listening for. And yes, the band has to sound good, but I agree with John. Just because a band sounds good doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a superior rating. I think that that it does boil down to good tone, good fundamentals. But are they executing those fundamentals within the piece? But to me, and this is just to me, if you're doing that, then that will get you a 2 or an excellent, or probably get you close to an excellent range. But to make it give it a superior rating, there has to be the artistic portion that students have to demonstrate. Are they taking a chance with dynamic range? Are they taking a chance when it comes to phrasing the melodic line? Are they taking chances when it comes to really bringing out certain types of colors within the piece, like truly composer's intent? Because I think it is one thing to play the notes and the rhythms and just to sound good, but I think there's that added layer. So I definitely agree with John that you do have some wiggle room to explore, I think, but at the end of the day, you have to take that. There is that next step. There is that next wall.
Yeah, I heard a joke one time. They're like, if you hand out the right piece of music to a band and you do nothing, it's a Division III. Anything above that is because of what you did. Anything below that is because of what you did. So like just trying to get them to focus on what they need. I always thought that was funny.
That is funny. Unfortunately, we are out of time. It's time to wrap this thing up. Guys, I think you shared so much great information. I'm going to ask you each to say one last thing, maybe one point that you especially made that you want to emphasize, or one last thing you'd like to leave our audience with as we're closing this conversation. I think this has been a really, really great, helpful conversation. Again, thank you to Leaders Creating Leaders at leaderscreating.com, which you guys are both a part of, for sponsoring this. Everybody should go there and check out all the great services they're offering. So Tremon, I'll go with you first, just randomly. What would you like to say in closing, just to leave people with?
I would say in closing, I will encourage you just to enjoy the journey with the students. MPA, any type of assessment should be a celebration of learning. And it should be a way for everybody to come together and just appreciate each other for the work, the dedication, the commitment that everybody took in the process. And the MPA portion, it really isn't, it's not the end all be all as well. It's just part of the journey. To remember that this is all about music making. It's all about helping students become the best version of themselves. And the way that we're helping students become the best version of themselves is through playing music in front of them that you believe is going to resonate with them and is going to resonate with the community, but also music that is going to resonate with you and inspire you to teach it well. So really just enjoy the journey, allow people to come in and be part of your journey, and also allow students to be the best version of the journey.
Yeah, I love that very much. And you sort of said something that I thought was really, really helpful that you guys started with was, sort of, you have to like it. You don't pick something that you don't want to spend all that time and effort studying and working on. John, what would you say in closing?
Yeah, I agree with everything Tremon said. From a practical standpoint, that's kind of where I end up anyway. Creating your stack. When you're creating your stack of music, the bigger the stack, the more options that you have. But I want to ask you, what composers are in your stack? What kind of music is in your stack? What eras? Do you have a mix of the different musical eras, or is it all post-tonal? So making sure that you are picking music that you can teach your kids beyond notes and rhythms. Do you have composers, female composers of color? Do you have diverse composers in your stack? Because you have students that need to play that, and it's terrific music to play. So, don't just pick all the tried and true, we've got a stack of a bunch of white old guys composing. Find all those pieces of music that are out there so that you can present your kids what they are. The demographic of what you play should match the demographic that you teach.
Very good. So John and Tremon, thank you so much for being a part of this conversation. Thank you again to Leaders Creating Leaders for making this happen. And thanks everybody who's watched this. If you found this helpful, please let people know that it's here and they can find the recording wherever you're watching this right now. So John and Tremon, thank you guys so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you, and Happy New Year.
Absolutely. Thanks.